Hey guys, this is EckhartsLadder. Hello and welcome to another Star Wars video. So today we'll be talking about Exegol, the Sith planet from the Rise of Skywalker, but I'm not going to be negative this time. Instead, I will talk about the things I liked from Exegol, but also examine how the planet, in my opinion, has the potential, or at least had the potential, to be one of the coolest locations in all of Star Wars. Why do I like Exegol, even though it's in a movie that I'm not a huge fan of? Well, I really like the idea of the Sith having this sort of ancient redoubt, a place where in their weakest moments they could return to hide, a place which sort of typified all this dark side power that's pure evil, sort of like a hell, and we'll come back to that idea in a moment. The genesis for this video actually came the other day when I was scrolling through Twitter. Follow me, by the way, if you haven't. If you did, you'd sort of get a preview into this video because I was looking at some old images that someone tweeted of the Rise of Skywalker. First of all, I noted that it's definitely the most blue Star Wars movie there is, and yeah, it definitely is. But I also noticed that Exegol in particular really reminded me of the artwork of, and I'm about to butcher this man's Polish name, Zdzisław Beksiński. Beksiński seems pretty well known on the internet in my experience because his paintings are really interesting and serve as a sort of introduction to surreal art because they have these very interesting themes. He often paints these striking hellscapes, and I mean, I certainly know very little about art or artistic styling or themes or whatever else, but I could identify a lot in Beksiński's art that appears in Exegol. I mean, obviously this statue scene seems to be a direct reference to one of Beksiński's paintings, but just generally, Beksiński's version of hell had a few similar elements that I think are worth pointing out. Often there's a very flat surface with dramatic silhouetted citadels or other large structures. You see the repeated use of the same shape over and over again, and you see striking geometric shapes, pure geometric shapes, like the citadel, which is a truncated pyramid on Exegol, or the standard pyramid in one of Beksiński's paintings. And to me, there are two things that really differ Exegol from the surrealist hellscapes that Beksiński paints. First of all, color. Exegol, for some reason, is almost uniformly blue. Perhaps that's meant to reflect Palpatine's Force lightning. I've seen some people suggest that. But we also know that Exegol was not always this color. In concepts, it was painted in a sort of red hue, perhaps at sunset, and even in the first trailer for The Rise of Skywalker, we saw the Battle of Exegol at sunrise or sunset, which is where the battle actually ends off even in the movie. The other main difference is that Exegol, in my opinion, does not go far enough into the bizarre and remains mostly mundane. Now, the best example of this, and this is all my opinion, comes with Palpatine. Palpatine is interesting, but he's not truly terrifying as he should be. He's basically just in a broken down form. I like the way that he's hooked up into the machines, but they could have went even further into Beksiński-esque type of imagery, or even something like H.R. Geiger by having his body maybe fused with the planet itself, and I think symbolically that would have worked really well, as would have moving to a red color instead. Why do I believe this? Well, in my opinion, Exegol really should have fully embraced the hellscape feeling that we get in these pictures that we've been seeing throughout this video. I said this in a tweet, and I'm just gonna re-say it here, that hell works for Exegol because you need to elevate the final stage of confrontation, the end of the Rise of Skywalker in the Skywalker saga, such that it's not just the good guys beating Palpatine again on some hidden Sith world. Exegol needs to be a heart of darkness. It needs to be symbolic for evil itself. The battle that the good guys are fighting at Exegol is not just against Palpatine and the Sith Reborn or whatever. They're actually fighting against evil itself. That's why you're not just throwing Palpatine down a reactor shaft again on some battle station. You're in hell. You're in kind of Palpatine's domain. You're in the place that represents everything that the galaxy will become if you don't stop him. Diving deep into that, I think, would have made the end of the Rise of Skywalker even more impactful. Exegol was really interesting and it was good. I especially liked the Sith Citadel, as I mentioned. I like some of the imagery around the statues, but to be honest, they should have made the movie even scarier. And, you know, Star Wars is ultimately for kids, or at least it's meant to be watched watched by kids as well as adults, so you do have a limit with how far you can go, but in my opinion, they didn't quite reach that. This was actually something that George Lucas played with for an original ending of Revenge of the Jedi, later Return of the Jedi. The final confrontation between Luke and Palpatine, and then also Vader, was meant to take place in some hellish underground sort of sanctum, Sidious's lair. And of course, that Devil's Throne was then later reused for the ending of Episode 9. So like I said, my main point is that you need to elevate the final battle for the Rise of Skywalker beyond what we get for Episode 6, because this needs to wrap up the trilogy. You can't have the final moments be less impactful than the final moments of Episode 6, so you need to raise the stakes, you need to raise Palpatine to the symbolic and personification of pure evil, and you need to have the good guys fight in some version of hell. Now, I mentioned that I think red would have been much better than blue in terms of color tone. Of course, that's not simply it, although there are some really cool fan renders of what Exegol would look like with red instead of blue. It's really more than just that, though. Again, I'm not an art major, and I really know less about art than the average person, but surrealism as an art style, and as employed in the earlier works that I mentioned, generally plays on bringing out the subconscious through sometimes uncanny or bizarre imagery. Basically, an image that you can't immediately tie to something real, like a suspended upside down pyramid, for example, helps bring out a person's creativity and dig into their subconscious as they're working through the problem. That's a very simplified version of the theory, at least as I understand it. Now, I think that this would be a very interesting thing to have seen in the movie, because again, at this point, we'd be moving past simple conflicts and into the actual sort of representation of good and evil on not only a galactic scale, but also on a personal level. And that can also help reflect the overall themes of the Star Wars universe. George Lucas's Star Wars, at least, was always about being a good person and trying to understand the conflict within you. I think if you can provoke feelings in a person's subconscious, even if maybe in an obvious way, or even if not going fully to that level, then you're bringing the whole conflict and the whole idea of this evil to another level. Interestingly, this is also somewhat what George Lucas was going for with some of his ideas for the Star Wars sequel trilogy when he was still working on those movies. He's described them at times as being more dreamlike, being more surreal, and also being more fantastic and diving into the individual. And I think you do need to do something, or they should have done something with episodes 7 through 9 to differentiate them from the prior movies, even if they were very bold, because you've already saved the galaxy. You've already seen the galaxy fall. This time, you need to be dealing with evil and good on a fundamental level, and I think that's what George Lucas would have gone for. And you can see with some of the very early concept art for episode 7 that this dreamlike quality made its way through, or at least could have made its way through, and that's something that I really would have liked to see in the Star Wars sequels, and I think is something that could still be done sometime. I want a Star Wars movie that's bold and that takes this mythos that we've developed or we've seen developed and takes it to another level. So yeah, that's just sort of my rambling thoughts on this. There's a lot they could have done. A simple color grade or a different color grade would have helped Exegol a lot, because I think the blue just ends up being oppressive and ends up making the whole thing very murky and just takes away from the overall feeling. But The Rise of Skywalker already is a pretty surreal movie. Like, the shots of the Star Destroyers coming out could have been a lot better if instead of just being ordinary Star Destroyers, they were something a little bit different, maybe just plain shapes or something else. They definitely should have kept that bog creature that was originally in the concept art, and I think they should have played more with the idea of those force flashes, those battles across the galaxy that Rey and Kylo had. I think if you focus on that, you change Exegol a bit, and you cut some of the unnecessary plot lines, the finding a million little daggers or whatever else, you would have had a better movie. And however, it's just my opinion. I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys think. Till next time though, be safe, have a good one, and may the Force be with you.